I came back to my lodge expecting pine-scented quiet and the sort of slow, honest silence that settles after a season fighting wildfires. Instead, there was a stranger at my stove wearing my aunt's denim apron, humming like she'd lived there her whole life. And before I could say the first sentence, she dialed the sheriff and called me an intruder. If that doesn't hook you. Hang on, someone tried to take my house with paperwork and performance, and what followed was a slow, legal kind of karma you don't see in movies but feel in your bones. My truck rolled over the gravel. The lodge hunched into the ridge the way it always has, and the first wrong thing I noticed was a silver Lexus parked too neat by the porch. The front door stood cracked. Inside, the smell of citrus cleaner and warm bread things I didn't leave. A woman turned at the stove, blonde hair pulled back, blouse crisp, and an apron that belonged to my aunt like it was a costume. She saw me and, without missing a beat, went loud. "Police, there's an intruder," she announced. "HOA compliance, hurry." Cedar Ridge hasn't had an HOA in years, but she had a laminated badge, color-coded forms, and the kind of practiced face people believe when they're not from here. Calmness mattered. Sheriff Luke Ramirez pulled up steady, and for a beat the whole scene almost worked. She handed him a neat packet, told a story polished enough to convince a stranger. "He entered without permission," she said. "I feared for my safety. I told Ramirez my name said I had the deed in the truck. He ran a clerk check and the county confirmed what I knew: Cedar Ridge HOA dissolved years ago. One lie unraveled, but she'd already bought time. Time to stake the ground, time to tell neighbors a tidy story, time to assemble the props of authority. You can't always shout down a narrative. Sometimes you have to outstructure it. So I didn't storm the porch. Aaron, my lawyer, in a steady voice on bad nights, said the same thing: document, don't perform. I packed a duffel and went to the little bunkhouse my uncle built, a timber box with one bulb, a workbench, and a sense that small, honest places give you headspace to think. Trail cameras and motion sensors we'd used for fire mitigation went up in hollow posts and under eaves. Timestamps were synchronized like witnesses. Evidence is a patient animal. Wake it, and it starts making noises lies can't imitate. By midnight, the cameras were doing their job. Malene at dawn with gloves and a can of spray paint scrawling fake graffiti and photographing it like proof. Her dragging my grandmother's portrait across the living room to stage a forced entry. Hammering orange stakes into the shoreline, measuring and mapping like someone prepping lots. A tall man in a collared shirt came at dusk, slid her an envelope and walked the perimeter with the casual authority of someone used to buying access. A name, people murmured aloud. Gavin Pierce, a developer who'd been sniffing around the lake for months. Rumor moves fast in small places. Malene told folks I'd abandoned the lodge, that the HOA had appointed her to manage community concerns, and some believed it because fear wants a neat answer. But the past has ways of burying proofs where the present can't see them. In a rusted lockbox in my uncle's workshop were letters from Fish and Wildlife and a watershed stewardship agreement stamped with federal embossment. That document forbids development in the protected buffer and requires federal review for transfers. It was the kind of paper developers hate. We handed Sheriff Ramirez the binder and the footage. He listened like a man who knows how to separate spectacle from substance and called county inspectors. They came expecting a routine check and instead found staged, damage-exposed roots where stabilizing shrubs had been removed, orange stakes hammered into soil that had held the slope for decades, graffiti that matched photos Malene had taken of her own handiwork. One inspector knelt and said, "That's an easement, that's a red flag." That phrase changes the tone of a whole conversation. Greed makes people sloppy. After the inspectors visited, the pressure made them hurry and make mistakes. Teenagers hauling framed paintings and tools into trucks at 2 a.m, porch railings unscrewed and stacked like props, survey markers swapped under cover of darkness. Cameras caught it all from multiple angles. Evidence piles up like snow. A single flake is nothing, but an avalanche is impossible to deny. Aaron said, "Let the footage do the work, because courts respond to patterns more than passion." The hearing was quieter than TV courtroom fights, but it was decisive. We played time-stamped clips and sequenced stake placement, staged vandalism. Midnight marker swaps, Gavin walking the ridge at odd hours. The stewardship binder crossed the bench. Judge Marlowe read the clauses, the kind of dry, deliberate reading that makes lawyers sit up straight. He said a temporary hold on any transfers dissolved the protective order that had kept me off my porch and ordered federal review. He didn't need theatrics paperwork, and time did the drama for him. Federal agents arrived in green field jackets and moved with a calm that makes a showman's bluster look brittle. They photographed stakes and disturbed soil-logged vehicle registrations, interviewed workers, and tested soil samples. A lead agent told me, "Your uncle didn't write that agreement for sentiment, he wrote it like armor." They called the stewardship language nuclear grade, a blunt way to say the easement was airtight. That kind of phrase from a federal investigator tends to change the math for anyone counting on quick wins and loose paperwork. At home, something human and humble happened. People came with tools. Tommy Jessup showed up with a pickup full of native shrubs and 2 retired hands who know how to coax a slope back into honesty. Neighbors who had whispered in the feed store came with coffee and apologies. They helped nail railings back in place, sweep dust from floors, replant roots they'd once walked past without thinking. The lodge didn't come back in one cinematic moment. It returned in small, steady acts, neighbors showing up because the truth required muscle as much as law. There were moments of raw frustration that felt almost comic in their audacity. Malene clutching a cracked frame and insisting vandals had done it while cameras showed her swing the hammer. Gavin pacing the shoreline and talking about revitalization, while his crew manufactured the evidence later presented as justification. Aaron and I cataloged everything: timestamps, receipts, truck plates, delivery logs. We matched a delivery to a truck, to a time code, to a photo, to a sworn statement. Chain of custody is the thing that converts rumor into legal fact. It's meticulous, and it works. One of the most satisfying quiet moments in the courtroom wasn't shouting. It was the silence when Judge Marlowe read aloud the clause that required federal review before any transfer or development. That clause, placed in the binder by my uncle years ago, turned a manufactured crisis into a pattern of potential felony when combined with the staging we'd documented. The advantage of money in a shiny folder collapsed under timestamps and federal language. The federal team issued restoration directives, cataloged the damage, and began interviews that dug into who authorized markers and who paid for nighttime surveys. They thanked me for documenting everything. I thanked Tommy Aaron and the anonymous neighbor who left a bag of nails at my doorstep at midnight. Justice here wasn't a thunderbolt. It was a careful process, a stack of evidence, a binder with a federal seal, neighbors willing to testify, and law enforcement willing to follow records. If there's a sting to this story, it's a simple one. Systems can be gamed when people don't watch. A forged packet and a practiced performance can convince those who don't dig, but the stitchwork of cameras, documents, witnesses, and persistence is harder to fake. Laws matter, but only when someone acts on them. A stewardship agreement is only a shield when someone pulls it off a shelf and says, "Look at this," standing on my porch as the sun pulled a gold line across the lake. The lodge smelling like pine and warm bread that finally belonged here, I felt a relief that was quiet and whole. Justice isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like patience and process. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor showing up with a shovel. So tell me, when someone uses paperwork and stagecraft to try to steal a place from its people, what's the right first move? Lawyer up and methodically build a paper case, pull the community into the light and make a public stand, or do both together? Share your story. Drop a yes if you stand with the stubborn owner who refused to be erased, and if you like ridge stories where truth wins slowly and properly, subscribe. There's another one already brewing.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.